In a world where systems shape opportunity and sometimes get manipulated.
When systems are perfect, they can't be manipulated. And particularly recently, if you've watched how the American politics played out with things that happened in Minnesota, similarly even here in Western Australia with schemes like the National Disability Insurance schemes, you'd see that these are people who came and understood the system and they found ways to manipulate it. The beauty of being from a different part to where you reside, so being domiciled in a new country, you have that legal status of someone of that jurisdiction, gives you a very, very strong advantage. It's like playing chess, starting with the queen, and your opponent doesn't start with the queen.
Newton Ndege is an entrepreneur, legal scholar, and director of GNG Global Investment, a man operating at the intersection of business, law, healthcare, and investments. How important is failure to the journey?
I wanted to be a doctor initially. I got 12 out of 100 in biology as my first exam, and some people have emotional intelligence and resilience. I ended up dropping the subject because I just couldn't handle failure. You can't relate to the taste of success if you don't know the pain of failure. And your resilience comes mostly from failures than it does from success.
From navigating systems as a migrant to questioning how they are built and who they actually really serve. Am I thinking migrants tend to struggle to fit into systems?
We follow mostly social law. Manuel started a photography media company. He will be my only Bible, and everyone else must follow suit. I'd say more than 50% of particularly people from my country who get entrepreneurship, they do healthcare. But they do the same scheme, they do everything. Yet there's thousands of schemes that exist. But why they're so centered on the same scheme is because they only understand what someone else did. They only got employed there, whereas there's hundreds, if not thousands of these types of schemes.
This is a conversation about perspective, failure, and the hidden advantages that most people never see. Because sometimes the real edge isn't where you start, it's how well you understand the game you're playing.
The lack of awareness normally leads to a depletion of your creativity. And further, once your creativity starts depleting, you rely more on repetition more than you do on development and taking more risks in things that you understand. Because I'm told I have to cross the road at point A, and I don't know the reason why I don't cross on point B and point C, and every day for my life I use point A to cross the road. How will I understand why point B is restricted or why point C is a better path to cross? I would never understand it.
I've been reading the comments and DMs, and they have filled with beautiful messages about how much you've enjoyed watching and listening to these conversations and how powerful the stories have been. But here's the problem. Over 90% of you watching are not yet subscribed, and I know you're watching. So please hit that subscribe button to join our podcast community and help us attain our goal of reaching 2,000 subscribers in the next 2 months. Thank you. Hi, Newton.
Hi, Manuel.
How are you today?
I'm very well, albeit a bit tired, but I'm quite excited to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for jumping on the invitation. I really do appreciate. You're quite a not difficult but busy person to get, and I do really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today.
All right.
We're going to be talking about a few things today. They're quite vast in many things. You sit at the intersection of law, business, and law, migration, and investment. And you're quite vast and knowledgeable in this whole area. Look, for those that haven't met you before, those in our audience that would like to know who you are, in 30 seconds, can you tell us who you are, walk us through who you are, and why they should lean into this conversation?
My name is Newton. I'm born and raised in Kenya. I moved here about 8 years ago, 8 years in August this year. I'm a solicitor by trade and qualification. And currently I'm working as the managing director at GNG Global Investment Group and also the lead intellectual proprietor for GNG Global Investment Group. And I also am a special case coordinator for GNG Healthcare Group and its managing director as well. I've done quite a lot of roles in my time as a student, but professionally I've also done a fair bit of work nationally, internationally, and mostly in the spaces of law, business, and diplomacy, as you've mentioned, yes.
Why should someone listen to this conversation today?
You gain a lot of valuable insights. I think the current world we live in, there's a lot of information out there. So you can acquire so much information as opposed to in the past. But with the acquisition of information, insightful knowledge particularly from other people, I find it's a really good way to discern any information people may have. So my perspective and views are very niche and unique because I've taken a different approach. When I came to Western Australia, I realized that standardization is a very big thing in this society in the West, only due to its isolation. So people do a lot of things the same way. People get married the same way. Wineries and this, people go for the same roles. People do the same thing. So I made it my point to try and be a bit different and to see what that path would lead me to. And that differential really helped me stand out in many ways. So the only reason I encourage someone to listen to this conversation and particularly try and get some insights from it is due to that a different nature of how I try to do things. Yeah.
There's this recurring narrative about migrants milking the system, taking much more than they give. What's your perspective on that?
I think it's true, but milking a system has to be viewed in two contexts. The first context is someone who does nothing but gains from a stable, efficient operating system. And the second context is someone who gives a lot, but also gains from the same system. Because the system is not made to not be milked, if I'd use that quote.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if you have a cow and it's producing milk 5 times a day, you won't get one bucket and then forgo the 4 times it's giving you milk. Because the milk can go from being of domestic use to of commercial use. And that's the same for systems like the Western systems, where they provide a good platform to do what you want to do, but also provide a good platform to be able to transition in other things, to be able to gain in other things that it's built for. I think that's why that quote, milking the system, it's always spoken out of context, or the context is never explained for you to understand why milking the system is something migrants will do. To take it back for where many of people who are accused of milking the system, these are people from the third world countries where we don't have those such strong systems. We do have systems, but they're not as reliable as some of the Western systems we have. Therefore, when someone comes here, it's almost like an excitement. You have an overflow of support systems that help you governance systems. Councils have systems, and whoever knows how to navigate those will be able to gain more from the system than not.
But in many instances, the context milking the system is saying it's pretty much like a negative connotation. So you're I'm looking for a nice way to put it, but also not being offensive because I understand what you're trying to say. But making the system in a negative where people just come, or it's perceived people just come because there's so much more to get from here than where you're coming from. Of course, that's also taken also from, for those saying this, they're also viewing those comments as coming from a place of course, depravity, poverty, and all that stuff, and then you come to a place of abundance and quote, and all you're doing is taking without valuable skill to add to the system.
I do agree that when systems are perfect, they can't be manipulated. And particularly recently, if you've watched how the American politics has played out with things that happen in Minnesota, similarly even here in Western Australia with schemes like the National Disability Insurance schemes and other sort of schemes, you'd see that these are people who came and understood the system and they found ways to manipulate it. And that manipulation is what really gets a lot of airtime in when people view how systems are used. I insist, the beauty of being from a different part to where you reside, so being domiciled in a new country, that you have that legal status of someone of that jurisdiction, gives you a very, very strong advantage. It's like playing chess, starting with the queen, and your opponent doesn't start with the queen, because you always have the hindsight view of where you come from and the challenge that exists, meaning if you survived in that system, you are much more advanced in how you learn systems, in how you are aware of things you can do, as opposed to someone who is from here. So they go through an extra level to be able to learn everything that's around them because it's perfectly available for them. It's been part of their system and their lives. It's the same reason why if I come to your house as a guest and I drop my pen, if you look for that pen, you may struggle to find it quicker than I'd, but because you're so aware of the environment. Whereas I may say I dropped it here and look 3 parts and I'll find it. That's just natural because you have you'll have foresight and hindsight, as opposed to someone who lacks that.
So if I understand what you've just said, as migrants coming from a place of, for want of a better word, lack and poverty, where you've seen so many opportunities or so many things that do not work, and then come to a place where systems work, you tend to be at an advantage point rather to implement or milk the system in quotes.
Yes.
If that's correct.
Yes. And to even provide you a better example, we also have migrants not only from impoverished countries or countries which are considered inferior. There's so many Americans who live here. There's so many British people who live here, and their systems are equally, if not better, in those jurisdictions. The only difference is it's a competitive jurisdiction. The only difference is the ease of access to those systems are the same. So sometimes two ends of the scale provide the same narrative, where if the public health system in America, you have to wait days and days for a specialist, whereas here, healthcare is considered to be better. So if a migrant came from Minnesota, Albuquerque, and settled in Perth just to be able to get adequate healthcare system, are they or are they not milking the system? That would be the real question.
Okay.
See, so contextually, it always has two very distinct sides, where some can manipulate it for their own personal gain, which many times it's illegal schemes and illegalities, and some can do it legitimately with the right purpose and intention to get that what they deserve from a perfectly functioning system, and in particular, where they're domiciled in such a jurisdiction.
Awesome. Look, I said earlier, you sit at the intersection of law, health care, and of course, an investment as well. Now, what problem are you ultimately trying to solve through the work you do?
I'm not trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to create a unique way of legal practice that has been ignored due to... So the 20th and 21st century had a lot of industrialization, and where systems were built out of very unique intellectual property. For instance, aviation. We only have 3 competing aviation companies that have dominated our markets for a very, very long time, you see. So you're Boeing, Airbus, and they've dominated it for a very long time. But due to the advancement of technology, due to the advancement of laws, due to the advancement of the world becoming a global village, you find that there's new emerging ways in which intellectual property can be used. So if I was an aviation manufacturer in Singapore, for the first time I have access to a bigger platform to be able to do what I want to do, in the essence of not competition, but uniqueness. If you look at, for instance, small planes, this is a great example. So Cessna used to be the largest producer of small planes, but currently we have so many other companies that are producing small planes that not only are better products in the sense of the regulations for, if you go to the Paris Convention 2024, things that are wanted to global emissions, so they can produce technology that is already advanced and beyond what the regulatory limits are currently there. So they're now competing. If you look at cars here, particularly Western Australia is a good example. See, cars like BYD, Build Your Dream, and cars like this, they're now becoming market dominant in the sense that they're budget friendly, but they also offer that alternative where if regulations do change, then we have a solution. So people who have electric cars for now, they've not been sitting on the news every day wondering whether fuel is going to be there or not, only because the product that they chose to buy at the time had already surpassed such a challenging future. So my ultimate purpose is what I'm trying to learn is how do I use my industry knowledge to enhance my skill as much as I use my skill to enhance my industry knowledge. In the traditional and modern approach of things, people normally gain a skill, get employed, and whilst they're in employment, they improve their skill and also improve their industry knowledge to be able to advance from one point to the other. However, with an equal platform of learning, with me being able to go to conferences here and there, I can learn the industry knowledge whilst I try and improve my skill to be able to have a superlative advantage over my peers within the same level, and in particular the industries that I'm really interested in.
Oh. One key thing I usually like to find out for many entrepreneurs I've spoken to is the whys.
Right.
For every entrepreneur, there must be a reason.
Right.
There's a story behind this new idea, this new business, this new journey they've decided to embark on. For yourself, what would that story be in relation to what you've just said now?
I realized when I was very young that I was going to be in the law, but for negatively, because I was not good in all the applied mathematics and sciences, apart from chemistry. So my genesis was the fact that when I was 12, I realized that I actually wanted to be a solicitor and I wanted to do law. And at the same time, I was in sports. I really love football. I think Arsenal Football Club is my club. We're suffering at the moment, but like let's not go there yet. So there was an intersection where I used to wonder how come a club like can pay hundreds of millions of wages every year, still be able to have all these commercial activities. And ultimately, I figured out through that journey of discovery, and I was very young, I figured out that it's an intersection between the legal discipline and commercial discipline and trademarks and copyrights, which ultimately is law. And all these things, that was the intersection of all of these different industries coming into one, and they give us this product of TV rights, watching such great leagues at 3 a.m., etc., etc. So my fascination grew when I moved from Kenya to the UK because I started seeing systems in that way. I used to wonder how come trains can operate here very efficiently. If it says 4:30 a.m., it will be delayed sometimes, but I can expect it to be there. And if it's not there, my consumer rights as someone who's using public transport are somehow guaranteed and protected, where the onus of responsibility goes to them. So different to where I came from, similar things did not exist. And if they did, they were not as efficient. And if they were efficient, they were not as available like that. And I started looking at things in that sort of light. I used to wonder how comes there's no CCTV in airplanes. Like, it would really be so handy if things happen in an airplane to have camera footage where people can review this. How come the claim for loss for baggage within every airline is maximized to a certain amount? And all of these questions used to make me wonder how powerful their legal skill was and how other skills as well complemented it and vice versa. So if you look at another industry, you find the finance skill is more important, but it needs other parts to be able to achieve what it wants to achieve. That was my genesis. And the biggest why was Perth was a very unique place for me. It has such a high standard in certain industries, mining, healthcare, whereas living in countries where everything you see is almost a near 70%, 60% efficiency, you fit in more in places like that than you do here. So when I came here, I felt I had a purpose to actually try and think what I wanted to do. So in short, the answer is that I moved to a place that was really open and was less competitive and had more opportunities than what I would have ever imagined at the age of 25 while I started doing professional stuff that I would live in. Then, and the second and most important reason was people who came from my country and other like countries, say Africans, were extremely successful here. From personal level, from community levels. And I was genuinely shocked about the level of success that we witnessed here in Perth than I had seen anywhere else that I'd been, particularly from a diaspora-centric view. Yeah.
I don't know about that last point, though. Yeah. Africans share successful here in Perth?
Yes. In Australia, isn't it?
In Australia?
Yes.
Do you have figures to back this up?
Yes. So last year, I'm doing a project with the Kenyan government at the moment. And it was not to my dismay because I had seen this, that diaspora remittances back to Kenya, Australia was leading in the world. But per capita, if you look at how many Kenyans are here compared to the US, it's almost 1 to 20. But our remittances were the highest in the world from Australia to Kenya. Now, equally, if you look at how many entrepreneurs we have, diaspora entrepreneurs we have in the US, it's also higher than those that we have here. And similarly, still, diaspora-based businesses in Asia Pacific were almost catching up to the number of remittances and other businesses doing business in Kenya.
Is that a good benchmark, though?
It is a great benchmark. Why it's a great benchmark is that it shows that if people can now understand the dualistic nature of their skill and their businesses, they can now even expand more. And if they don't want to expand more, they can realize that it is a market that is worth exploring, because that skill can only be transformed in other industries, other jurisdictions like that. And that's the beauty of that diaspora-centric view, where Australia gave me, and I realized, okay, if someone who's 19 or 20 can manage to pay their own tuition fees, can manage to do all of this, but yet still have a social life, there must be something that's underlying that enables them to do that. And that was the opportunities that were there.
I'll take you back a bit. Walk me through what growing up was like for yourself.
Growing up, I grew up in Nairobi, Kenya. I went to boarding school when I was 9 years old. And it was a great school, although a bit militant, in the sense that you may relate to this, but there were boarding schools in some parts of my country were very strict. We had very strict regimes of when to sleep, when to wake up. As a 9-year-old, I couldn't imagine now when I see 9-year-olds waking up at 4:30 a.m. to go and water grounds and make sure that there's no dust and do chores. It's almost, for me, it's impossible to imagine that at this stage when I interact with 9-year-olds and I see what a 9-year-old is. I did 7 years of that, or not 7, from class 4 to class 8, so about 5 years of that. And I went to high school in Sunshine Secondary School in Nairobi, which was also a boarding school. Sunshine was much better. It was an upper class school where I met people who were from different classes. So rich people, middle class people, poor people on scholarships. Sunshine was great because the sports was good. Academics was very competitive. But the best thing I got from that was the social cohesion I got with people from different classes. Because it was the most important thing I wanted to learn from learning with people who come from rich families and different parts of the country, is how you can actually socially be able to sustain being with classmates, teammates, roommates, because dormitory mates, we had dormitories, And at home, I have 3 siblings, 2 brothers and 1 sister, and both my parents also alive, well and healthy, and cousins and friends, and very good friends. So growing up was a very sedentary lifestyle due to boarding school. So we had very short holidays, and it was mostly academic focused, growing up. So people do tell me a lot that was a big advantage. As you may know, that Kenya has a very high academic standard. Therefore, being in school, there's a lot that's expected of you, which in my view, I think it's one of the most negative things about our education system. In the sense and the essence that it really suppresses people's values, other values beyond academics. It develops only your resilience within academic space, and it leaves a big gap on your social and moral and also emotional development. So I can go on and on, but ultimately the conclusion would be, I think that academic-centric focused childhood was quite a negative thing in upbringing, because you start learning a lot of your social mannerisms and good social behaviors and positive behaviors when you are at a very developed age.
What moments, I'm trying to pick from that statement, but I'll come back to that. If you walk me through memorable moments growing up, there were things that happened that you still hold very dear to yourself today, that shaped the person you are, or that shaped the person you've grown into today? What would this be?
The one moment that I've actually never shared this publicly, it's my grandfather passed away when my dad's second brother, so Newton Ndege, and his youngest brother Ken Ndege were very young. So he lived with them. We lived as brothers. But so seeing them going to university and becoming, so Honorable Newton Ndege is a judge at the moment, and Ken Ndege is an orthodontist who's my uncle. Seeing them growing up, that moment was very distinctive for me, because I was seeing sort of a future, what I wanted to do and what we were being told, because my mother or my father would always tell us that those 4 professions were the best profession to be this, and that. So seeing that, it was almost a personified example at home, and that was very unique. And I really enjoyed being in when they were Like when Alois became a lawyer being admitted, we were there. I remember the party very well. When my uncle was in university, we'd visit him and play PlayStation in his hostel. And those moments were just amazing because it made me almost have a plan and understanding what growing up would be. That would be the first one. The second one was failing biology in Form 1. I wanted to be a doctor initially, you know. But I failed, but I got 12 out of 100 in biology as my first exam. And unlike many people some people have emotional intelligence and resilience, I ended up dropping the subject because I just couldn't handle failure. And I'm so happy that I failed something that I really wanted to do, only because I came to understand, to have a different relationship with failure after that. You know, because you again may relate to this in business. Sometimes before things get going, you fail more than you actually achieve.
Yeah.
And sometimes you try to do something and a project doesn't go the way you want it to go. And you can relate to that failure in so many ways. But that core memory when I was a child, when I failed biology, to date and everything else I failed in, and I failed more than I have succeeded in my life, was a very great shift to who I am today.
How important is failure to the journey?
I think it's part of the process.
Because a lot of people, this point, sorry to jump in, this point, it's right there to me as well, to be honest. Because, like, I think I did mention last time we saw it. For many people, we talk about the successes and we don't talk about the failures. Whereas those ones, they failed more. I think not every entrepreneur, we've all failed more than we succeeded. But the good thing is you only need one success to right all the wrong. But I'll let you jump in there. What's your failure? How important is failure to the journey of an entrepreneur?
I'll try and analogize this. If you cook without salt and pepper, or try and have a meal without salt and pepper, if I was to come up with any sort of analogy out of this, I'd say that failure would be either salt or pepper to any meal that you do in the context of entrepreneurship. Where lack of, you may still have a great meal, satisfying, but you may lack a lot of the essence of what the taste is. You can't relate to the taste of success if you don't know the pain of failure. And your resilience comes mostly from failures and it does from success.
You can't relate to the taste of failure
Of success.
Success if you
Don't understand and can't relate to the pain of
failure.
Yes.
That's true.
Now that's pain. Now there's the salt side of it is the lessons from failure. Because when you relate to pain, have you learned something from it? See, I think failure has more valuable lessons than success does. Because to become a successful person, I understand it's more about sustenance, than it is development. Yeah. So the top 1% rich people, they try and find new jurisdictions to keep their money like that. That's just sustaining wealth like that. Whereas if you're growing to that level, you have to keep developing your skill, your network and everything. Now it can come from opportunities, but mostly it comes from you pay a 800,000 tax bill this year, next year you want to pay it less. You have to develop your knowledge and that you have to seek advice that gets there, and etc. etc. So it's very important, actually. I think failure is one of the core experiences that many people, not only entrepreneurs, not only practitioners, not only everyone. Now think of a baby trying to walk, Peter. You know, everyone always calls you, they're like, oh, Junior walks today. But no one calls you and tells you, Junior attempted to walk today 4 times, but in one time he hit the head in his wall. You never hear that story about a baby trying to walk, but you'll always see the videos of them walking themselves. Yeah.
That's quite interesting analogy. Failure. Failure is something, personally for me, I've had to rethink or start, not like I've started, it's something not part of me, like whenever I go into a new venture, I prepare for failure. Because I don't see it as failure, as it were. I see it as, okay, the things I need to learn to get to where I want to go to. Because part of learning or part of getting to where I'm going to, failure is essentially part of that journey. So it's then preparing to encounter those failures or those moments you call failure moments and pretty much find ways to navigate it. Look, I wanted to take this conversation further a bit. For us as migrants here in Australia, there is this thing about business we haven't really gotten yet. And for many people, they struggle to build businesses. And that's why I was a bit I wasn't so sure about when you said migrants are succeeding more, or you have more successful migrants in Australia than any other parts of the world. Yeah, but I also think, do we have successful employees, or successful migrants or businesses? Because those are two different things.
Yes, they're extremely different. Again, the success part is an outcome viewed statistically.
Okay.
So if you look at the process, it's much difficult here than it is anywhere else. That's just the outcome of it. You see, here there's higher wages, than
Yes.
stuff like that. Here there's less burden of, say, like social demands. There will be more in other jurisdictions. So the outcome of it is what, if you assess it that way, they ultimately become more successful.
Well, you earn more. I don't want to. I wouldn't want to call it success. Perhaps we just earn more.
Yes. Yeah. The diaspora is why they struggle in entrepreneurship here, diaspora members, is we follow mostly social law. So Emmanuel started a photography media company. I am that. You'll be my only Bible. And everyone else will ask to follow suit. I think that's the biggest thing that actually takes entrepreneurs back from the diaspora perspective.
Sorry, take that again. Let me get that.
So I'd say more than 50% of particularly people from my country who get entrepreneurship, they do healthcare. See? Yeah. But they do the same scheme, they do everything. Yet there's thousands of schemes that exist. Only if people knew these other schemes, they would try in those other schemes, and they'll be vastly different. They'll be distinctive businesses within that space. But why they're so centered on the same scheme is because they only understand what someone else did. They only got employed there like that. Whereas there's hundreds, if not thousands, of these types of schemes. So the lack of awareness normally leads to a depletion of your creativity. And further, once your creativity starts depleting, you rely more on repetition more than you do on development and taking more risks in things that you understand. Where all of that lacks, we also lack trusting advice. It's very hard for you to learn new industries, to take risks when you can't trust advice. And some may call me biased simply because I'm in the business of advice myself. But before I got into that business as well, everything we had to rely on was advice. If we didn't get as much advice as we did, we would have profited more 2-3 years ago. Good dividends, blah, 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 blah. But most of that money was reinvested in advice in Kenya and the UK. And it's difficult, it's challenging when you're making income and you're paying all of it to be told how to do things. And the sad part of it is sometimes you actually know. If I come and sit here and I tell you something and you read it and I say exactly what you said, then people get pissed off. They start wondering, why do I need this? But there's one thing that they forget, that when you discharge your professional duty to someone who has guided you to do that thing, you're also covered. That means the liability shifts from you to the person who guided you, which is also a protection for your business, for your idea. You see, because now suddenly your idea is insured. It's insured based on my professional obligations as someone to have that insurance to be able to give someone advice. And those are the niche things. And I say they're niche because not many people think about this. People think about the structure of a building, but nothing else. There's a very famous Spanish architect story of someone who and his wife, they built a perfect library. This was the most revered library in Spain. After it, the building was condemned because they forgot to account for the weight of the books. So the building sank day by day and the building couldn't be used. Sometimes the weight of the books may be the only thing that will make you not get what you want. And that's the beauty of advice, because you will not understand the weight of that decision. And when you discharge that, for you to just instruct, so it makes it lighter. And now you have a library that can carry its own weight. Because when you're challenged by contracts, when you're challenged by things, you can seek advice. You can trust someone who has that skill and speciality to be able to guide you on that, what you want to do.
Could it be said to be the reasons why, in my thinking, migrants tend to struggle to fit into systems that were not necessarily built for them, like this?
Yes. Because if I'm told I have to cross the road at point A, and I don't know the reason why I don't cross on point B and point C, and every day for my life I use point A to cross the road, how will I understand why point B is restricted or why point C is a better path to cross? I would never understand that. So I'd sit really stuck in a system that I don't understand and I don't relate to. The failures of that system become my failures. The success of that system becomes my successes. The challenges of that system become my challenges as well.
No. Advice. When do I need an advice? So oftentimes, with the world we live in today, where ChatGPT is there, I can always and then give him a context, give him some context, and he will not hear that it generates a few responses for me. Why would I want to go seek someone like yourself for advice? Why won't I just ask ChatGPT?
Right. Advice encompasses a lot of things, where if in an advisor's role, a consultant's role, or someone who basically is in professional services, we go beyond just knowing what to tell you, because we also have to guide how your understanding of that advice is, how your application of that advice is. So ChatGPT was not an all-rounded system where, and many other informal types of advice, they're not all-rounded systems to assess all the various parts to make something comprehensive enough for action, not for information. And I started by saying this: we have a lot of access to information, but how to discern that information is different. The best time to seek advice is when you have relative understanding of something, but don't know how to apply that knowledge to anything. You see? So I know, for me, I'm in current path, I want to go back to going to church. I know all the churches here, but I don't know anything about them to be able to make the decision where to go. So I've been calling my friends. So when I catch up with you, I'll ask you, Manuel, what church do you go to? Why do you go to that church? Do you recommend it? etc. So I understand, I have the information where the churches are. I know what type of denomination they are, but I've come to you for a much better understanding of your own experience within that church. And best, if you're a churchgoer, that speciality of being a churchgoer will be able to enhance my decision making or diminish it based on whatever I'm told.
Would that be biased opinion though?
Yes, but advice is biased to whoever is seeking it. You see, if you come to me to tailor your business, I will just set it the way Rio Tinto is set up. I'll be biased towards whatever you want to achieve within that. Not necessarily the standard structures that everyone must abide to, those are statutory obligations. But beyond that, there's things which I'll say, okay, Emmanuel will not work well in a council which is very dominant in how they treat businesses. Maybe move a bit further in the outskirts of the city to get more commercial space and to get this and that. You see, that's tailored to Emmanuel, and it's biased towards you. And it has to be biased towards you. Yeah.
I'll come back to that. Now, when we started this conversation, we're talking about relationship. And it's something I'm really interested in. I didn't think you were going to be open to talk. And reason being that I've had quite a few conversations. Some have been heated. Some are like, I should have said that. And so I'm becoming too careful when I ask people these days, because at the core of the conversation we're having, I don't want to put people on the spot.
Right.
As well as I don't want you to go say this you don't want to say. And
yes,
this is great why you've come onto the podcast.
Yes. No, I do insist. I'm very open about this, yeah.
So let's talk about relationship. Why do you think we're talking about the right relationship and purpose, that you might have the right person. Okay, no, I'll take it the way you put it. You might have someone that's purposefully designed for you, but might not be the right person, right?
Right.
So why is that? Why would that be the case?
Because in compromise, your purpose can shift. And people normally don't think about whether they do want the purpose to shift at that time. You see, I love relationships because I'm a social person and I'm quite extroverted. Yeah. So naturally I lean into relationships. I don't consider myself very experienced in relationships. I've been only in 3 relationships, which were somewhat successful. And I come to find that my purpose really shifted when I was with different partners. And that's why I came to learn that your purpose also matters when making such choices. Your plan also matters when making such choices. Partners are important because they give us some essence of three core things. Something called status and importance, you know. I used to always make this joke to my friends. I think if the day I get married, when I go and buy coffee, I'll make sure I hold it where my ring can be seen. And instead of waving this way, I'll wave whatever hand it goes to. Because it gives you that symbol of status, that you are part of a union, and the common assumption is always that that union is going well. Hence why you're still. That's just a common assumption.
Is that correct?
Yes. I've never seen someone who's married and I immediately assume he's unhappy. Ever. I always just, unless I ask them, I always just assume that the common assumption is they're in a stable relationship. Yeah.
Okay.
The second bit is the connection. You know, humans are drawn to connect to other people, physically, emotionally. And it's also very important to be connected to people. Why? Because from those connections comes the third most important thing, trust. Yeah. So when trust and security is something young adults don't mostly think about, because some people are very insecure within certain unions, and it could also be external factors, you see. So you have, like you said, you have the right partner, but you're very insecure around her friends and family. Right? And that now is eating out the security you feel within that relationship. You know? And what I came to understand through this was that all three pillars are very important. And when one fails, it's almost definite that the relationship can fail, or you work a bit harder to amend it. And they're also, you don't share common trust in a relationship. You have trust towards one person, another person has trust towards you. You know, a connection, there has to be someone who's receiving that, the reciprocity factor of that connection is these two people, you know. And again, the status and importance comes only from your partner. And also you give it back. So it's, the mutuality of it is as important as the individual nature of it. Hence why you could have someone who's, say, right for you, you're attracted to, you like them, they like you, like that, but your purpose is completely shifting. Say you had a plan to do something, but now you're trying to eradicate that plan only to sustain that. And they...
Is it a right? Wait, no, that's not the question. No. Trying to get these two together. The right person, wrong purpose, right purpose.
Or deviating purpose. It doesn't feel wrong.
Okay, the deviation from your intended purpose. So let's put it in practical terms. I would like to be a doctor, for instance, and I get into a relationship from my partner, or my partner doesn't think that's, well, doesn't see herself as a wife. Okay, I'll put it typically, I want to be a pastor, and my partner doesn't see herself as a wife of a pastor at all. And that is really not where she wants to be. That's nothing she wants to be associated with. And then all of a sudden, I'm beginning to tilt away from that calling, just to to sustain, in your words, to sustain this relationship. Now, should I then be saying, okay, I've got a purpose, stick to that purpose and find somebody that would align, or I would then, okay.
I think what I'm saying is give the same consideration to your purpose as you do to whatever.
But if these two can come together,
you then assess them that way. Yeah, consider them both, that they cannot coexist, and what you want to value more. Ultimately, the choice is it's oneself's ultimately. Therefore, it's just in consideration. They have to be weighted equally as important.
You said something earlier. You had like relationship, got them successful, and you saw they were shifting you away from your purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
In what sense?
In the sense that in my last relationship, I felt very driven to be expressive in my creativity, to be expressive in what I wanted to do, and not be sedentary, just standard job that I was doing. Great job, but I just felt like I had a different drive and purpose to be certain things, only because I love that the relationship challenged me. It challenged my ideas and my understanding of my emotional maturity, my understanding of what I wanted to become. Because before that, I'd standardized all of that just to be able to achieve a different purpose, to be present. physically and emotionally. Because when you go, you understand this. When you're spending countless hours of night thinking about an idea, it can really take you away from being present. So the reverse was, and this one I felt more challenged to be expressive as to who I am and what gifts and talents that I have, that it enhanced my purpose of entrepreneurship. And you were there at my corporate lunch party. I did give thanks to the party. Remember I said, and I had to give a special thank you for someone who drove that purpose forward. And that's why I'm saying I've come now to understand that consideration can always be put towards that when you're making long-term relationship plans, because you may have to amend some of the plans. My point was not to say that you now need to challenge every relationship you have based on those two things. Is to you also have to give consideration in weight of your thinking towards that as much as you do in everything else of your values that make this relationship work.
Would you say your view on relationship has changed significantly from when you left Scodian?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'll put it this way. This new view you have about relationships, did that all formalize why you were here, or that's always been your view on relationship?
Even for it's never been my view. I told you when I was talking about school that I graduated school being very emotionally and socially immature. So I'm quite shy by nature, despite being extroverted, but I was also very emotionally immature. So things like anxiety, I learned them when I was 24. Impulsive thoughts, impulsive talking, insecurities, self-image, negative self-image. Sometimes trying to live a facade to be able to please people, but you don't have any happiness towards that. You see, all of these things, that's who I was, say, 10 years ago, 13 years ago when I graduated high school. And in every relationship, friendships that I've been in, as I keep developing these traits of learning what emotional maturity is, of learning who I am, of being comfortable, being uncomfortable in certain situations, it has enhanced my connection. It has enhanced my trust in people and my security within relationship. That has enhanced even the type of attraction that I have. Like a long time ago, I used to be attracted to a certain type of person. Nowadays, I'm attracted to a different type of person. And it's very, very unique. That growth, if you look at it in reflection, and particularly by talking to people, and it's very different, my views then. The other thing it's worth mentioning is, like, for instance, when I was young, I used to have a desire to interracially date. And at no point did I think that races are just identity based on skin color, but beyond those races, there's a culture as well. So an Estonian can date an English person. My traditional view used to be that's just a couple, but it's not an interracial couple. However, it's an intercultural couple, because they come from two very distinct cultures. Yeah. So the other view that changed so much was my appreciation of differences within cultures and societal standards. People in different societies have different expectations, whereas we didn't have such. We had a standardized format of what you do. Girls don't pay. Girls don't do this. Like blah 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 blah. And I really struggled with that growing up. And when I came to learn that it's more about how someone can be open to learning a different culture, I came to understand that it's a very unique thing to be able to live outside your country, because even when you are dating people, you date people from completely different cultures. And it's just beautiful. It's in all my friends. I have very many friends from different cultures, and I like challenging them to come to my house. I'll cook for you Kenyan food. And I'm really keen to hear your view.
Do you cook?
Let's give us a conversation. Yes, I do cook.
Okay, good.
So simple pleasures like that are they do enhance social relationships and also intimate romantic relationships and that. And I have a bigger appreciation of differences in life and personalities and societies than I've ever had in my life, only because I have been in an intercultural relationship and I have dated people from my country. And that's why I see that it enhances your choice, the power of choice that you have. And it also enhances the pool of people that you want to spend time with, the people who you want to date. It's a privilege.
I do have a different view though. So I've got friends, right? We all have friends. And I'm married. I've got 2 kids now. I've just, I guess one is like three weeks old. That's how late this kept. Anyway, that's by the way. So I've got friends, my age, younger and stuff like that. And I said to them, I think you'll find it difficult to settle with someone because you've dated all sorts. And I do find that whilst we might say that it's a good thing to, experience life with different people, I personally find that to be to have a negative impact or impact our ability to decide on who to be with, because now we're judging each of these people with different standards. I personally say to one of them, I doubt if you're going to settle down because now you've dated everyone. There seems not to be anyone that is good anymore. And then becomes a problem for you in deciding who to settle with. Whereas if I had an open mind, all right, want you, and then I decide, because there's really no perfect person, to be honest, and then I could just, anyway, I'll leave. What's your take on that?
My take is sometimes power of choice comes from decisiveness or indecisiveness. How you use your experiences can make you more decisive than indecisive. Similarly, I'll give you a good example. When we put out job ads and we get an application, you always see I've ever got a resume that someone has left a job every 3 months and they had, say, 100 roles in 10 years. It's a bit concerning. Eh? People call it, these are the red flags of corporate.
Yeah.
I always make it my point to interview those people. Even though they will not make the cut, I always give them the chance to understand why have they been so indecisive or what has actually changed. Why has someone had 10 roles in 2 years or like that? And the common fact I came to find out now that some people, like you said, were too experienced that they ultimately became indecisive in what they give the chance to feel settled and to feel stable within. So anything that made them uncomfortable, they would leave simply because they have the power and the background of experience, just like you've mentioned. And sometime when you see someone who's worked for 30 years but has only been in 2 firms but has not grown so much, it's the same. It's also a red flag in corporate standards. And I also wanted to hear what was it. So their lack of experience or lack thereof led to that indecisiveness as to whether they want to leave, where the sense of security was more important than the sense of adventure.
Okay.
So it still comes down to one person, where if you think that my encouragement was people to date all over, no, because you see, dating is more of attraction. You like someone, you try, there's opportunity, there's chance of, it's much easier nowadays because we can assess people on Instagram.
Right.
There's digital apps for romantic apps like that, but mostly social media and also people's interest. What it has just enhanced is that people can amend their interest to be able to look more desirable. At the same time, people can also minimize what they put out there to be able to look robust, so that anyone who can penetrate that robustness, that becomes how they separate who to give a chance and who not to give a chance. So the experience and having diverse experiences, in my view, I think I've noticed that it leads to more decisiveness than it leads to indecisiveness, like that.
Do you believe in prenup?
Not prenuptial agreement in the sense that I will never talk to someone about prenuptial agreement, but I do believe in discussing people's view on things like divorces and that. It's an easier way to have that discussion than just talking about a prenuptial agreement, because the lead up to it is, see, a contract has 3 basic elements. There has to be an offer, consideration, and then agreement. So if you talk about a prenup, I'm at the agreement stage. But what leads to that being offered? What's the consideration of people thinking about that?
Is marriage a contract?
It is, yes. It's a social contract.
Is it business?
Yes, to some people it can be very...
to you, is it?
No, for me it's mostly for me, I use marriage. I view marriage as a social tool that can enhance connection and unionship within certain people in the parameters of the legalities of that jurisdiction to be able to allow enhancement and development of people in different phases of their life. Yeah. I have friends now who are actually married, and I see their changes in how they view things, and it's something I yearn for and desire quite a lot. But I think the best time and God's time, I think, will dictate that path. Yeah.
I'll just ask one more question on that and then we'll move on from marriage. Why is it important for entrepreneurs to settle or look for the right way to put it, right way to put it. So as entrepreneurs, key things that would help you, I consider marriage or your partner to be key indicator as to whether you're going to succeed or not.
Right.
All right. Because that has played a significant role in the person I've become still myself personally. So I'll put this question to as entrepreneurs. Why do you think the wrong person could make or mar you as a business person?
Okay, so I'll preface it by saying, first, I'm not married.
Okay.
So these views are also just things that I've researched, things that I've asked, and things that I've tried to be guided through mentorship. My view on marriage and entrepreneurship is simple. I think it's a grounding element to various things. Entrepreneurs, most of the time, do not have control of A, their identity, and B, their perception. So I always view life to be, it's a perception of a perception. I'm here hoping that you view me the way I think you view me. Not because I will never be able to know how you view me unless you share words. And vice versa, so perception or perception. So societal perceptions are very important to entrepreneurs. If you own a cafe, you'd want everyone in your society to know that this cafe is owned by Emmanuel, and Emmanuel makes good coffee, plays great music, it's good company, it's clean, it's community-centric, it promotes things, etc. Therefore, marriage plays a good role of enhancing that identity. Because when people see that you can sustain a relationship, which is almost the hardest thing to sustain because it's personal. Sometimes it has no standard format, sometimes it has no standard structure. It's also very intimate and private. It's a key indicator to someone's ability to be grounded and to balance a lot of things. That's how I view it. In the same sense, I've seen entrepreneurs who have the identity that they have freedom of choice and they need to have their own time to be able to advance most of the things they do, and they do get married quite late. As a matter of fact, in my country, and also the Americas, people who are entrepreneurs always tend to get married later than their peers. And again, there is no standard time for someone to get married. Yeah, that's how I view marriage in entrepreneurship.
Okay, so then the question would then be, why should I, as an entrepreneur, how important is the right person, partner now, to an entrepreneur?
It's very important. Entrepreneurs are people who live mostly in their heads, how I view it. And not many people then understand or relate to the things people have to go through to be able to build successful ventures. Safe spaces are the best way to do it. When I struggled in business and in these things, I found that my friends, particularly, and I have to say this, my good friends, so Dr. Kessel and all these guys, these people were the reason why I could actually sometimes think about the next steps, because you felt free and open, and to some extent they could also relate to it when you discuss it with them. When you share that I'm struggling in this, or we are not reaching our targets yet, or I'm overwhelmed and I don't know what to do, they ended up being the grounding effect that I needed during those times I felt emotionally unstable. And I have a great deal of jealousy when I see my friends who are entrepreneurs and they're married, because unlike me, who's going home to make a cup of tea or to crack open a beer or to watch Arsenal lose, I would only be able to have that sense of joy with my friends, as opposed to they who I would only assume they get it at home. So the right partner gives that grounding effect in a grand way, because they may never be able to understand you, but they're almost bound to listen to you. They're almost bound to be there for you. And those principles really enhance people in business to be able to feel safe beyond that they cannot escape, which is their business. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll move further a bit. What are the key things as migrants Africans particularly, we should understand about wealth building, especially here in this country? And how do we build leverage?
Wealth building it's a very, very long journey. You know, as a matter of fact, I think it's one level beyond riches. What I think Africans don't understand is that they can be selfish. There's a common term in finance at the moment which people really take lightly and jokingly, but it's a big problem in many of our diaspora communities. People call it black tax. You know. There's an understanding from people who live back home, and I've gone through this, that the moment you step foot in a Western country, that you're financially capable, that you don't have any problems, or that your problems are pompous problems, or they have a cushion, and their problems are real problems. So a great deal of people, particularly from Kenya, always spend a long time taking care and catering for people back home, instead of looking at their own selves. So you find someone has no savings, someone has nothing, but they've managed to pay tuition fees for a whole village back home. They managed to do this. Now, that's a choice. My only thing I'd say, to build wealth, you need to have the power to say no. And that's the hardest thing to achieve in life. When you get a call from your mother and like that, but you have a target, you need to pay your mortgage, you need to do this. And just say, no, I cannot help with this project this time. I can plan it and I can let you know when it will be ready. Okay. Equally, the power to say no if you really want to do something and you know it doesn't fit in and conform to it. I struggle with that to date. To date, I've complained about this, and I've cried about it to people, about how it is hard to go on a dinner date here and spend $100 when someone, a cousin or a friend back home, has asked me for 1,000 Kenyan shillings, which is the equivalent of $10. I start feeling guilty. And it's something so natural, I can't get rid of it. I have done everything to try and get rid of that feeling, but I cannot. But it's a single-handed most biggest hindrance to why people take a long time to feel financially stable, because you miss a crucial window. That your development years become almost years where you are also trying to support a lot of people, then you miss the development. And suddenly you're in a social structure, which is a family or this, and then you now don't have a lot of time to develop all your personal, say, wealth journeys, etc., etc. And vice versa. Many migrants who have a goal to be domiciled in these countries, they go through a great deal of emotional distress because they have the uncertainties due to migration laws, which are also costly and expensive. So when do you ever get that bedrock of creating a foundation? Because without a foundation, you cannot build wealth. Without foundations, you cannot build structures. And the foundation was simple. Learn positive habitual traits of professional planning, again, seeking advice, understanding, etc. And they all need a very, very, very great deal of emotional stability. And when you lack that, it means that you spend an enormous amount of time, 10 years to 15 years, before you get that stability. But then the question of, would you have the energy? Would you get the same opportunity? No. That becomes a big question. Like, in terms of wealth, me, myself, not being a wealthy person, I'm wealthy in experience for my age, but I'm not wealthy in the sense of riches. Yeah. That's the only hindrance that's been my hindrance. And I think that's also been a hindrance to many people who come here from other places. Yeah.
How do we learn to say no? It's easier to just say no. Yeah. I mean, it's easier for us both to sit here and say to our viewers, just say no. But also, you also understand the emotional difficulty that requires the emotional struggle we go through to say no, straight from our loved ones, our families, your mom, your dad, your siblings, thankfully, like that. In some ways, maybe you're probably the only one looking, forward to helping with that problem. Another way I put it as well would be, another way I look at this as well is, of course, we get those people calling us once in a while. And I said to people, look, I've got this, so we've got 6 siblings, we're all scattered around Nigeria, Canada, UK, myself and my brother here. And you get an uncle send you a message, and then they've sent my siblings as well the same messages. And I said to them, or rather I said to them, look, for the fact they've sent me this message, they've sent it to maybe a few other people. So if I cannot help you, you're probably going to get the help from somebody else. And that's also one of the ways I have been able to say no. So I can't help you because I know you sent that message to Newton, you sent it to Ike, you sent it, so you're probably expecting something from.
Yes. How I developed mine was giving notices to people. And those notices served as people's awareness of that I'm also. So I say the assumption is you're in the Western world and you're
Okay.
doing well. For instance, this year I want to go to America, and one of my great friends is getting married, and I'm the best man in New York. So I decided to tell everyone quite early that, hey guys, I'm not be able to be helping a lot this year financially because going to America is expensive. I'm going to be using manual transactions and etc. So I need this year to just do this. So I want to buy a new car, for instance, and I need some comfort. So I'm going to be a bit frugal. So you tell your friends I'll come to the pub once a week, but I won't be able to come twice because that will help me reach my goal, be able to get a car. If you can bypass the no, you will never have to say no. You know that, So if I tell everyone that I'm trying to do this, you'll find you get more encouragement than you do get requests. You'll find you get more understanding. Where people say, oh, why don't we go to the park and bring a picnic basket, everyone, and bring a puff of beer.
Yeah.
And you find that deviance to your standards, that's how people can accommodate you, gives you the chance to not be able to say no. The best other thing is that it creates a culture amongst your peers, your family, that's of openness and honesty. Because the power of saying no is because you trust someone will not take it negatively. Why I'm not able to say no is because I never can understand how will they take it. Yeah. So if you create that culture of openness and honesty, you find you have a bit more of understanding that, okay, I don't think I'll take this badly. Newton, please come to us to Spain this year. I want to go and dance in a music festival somewhere. I'm already going to America. I want to save up my leave because I want to go home for a longer period of time. I hope you guys understand, but please enjoy yourselves and don't not enjoy it just because I'm not there. See, do that so many times in your life amongst your closest friends and your peers. You'll find that culture will reign within yourselves. And that hurdle of saying no becomes less. And it's like going from a big bump to a speed bump. It becomes part of organization. It becomes part of emotional regulation when you talk to a friend. You become more open, you become more honest, and ultimately, people understand that your vulnerability is not misplaced by you being selfish or greedy, but rather you being open and trusting that they will understand you.
How do we then build leverage? Talked about come to leverage. But before I come, I'll let you go there. How do we build leverage in the system?
Leverage system is built by understanding the system and your social value. See, we because I don't want to talk about migrants. I can only talk about East Africans and particularly Kenyans. We derive a lot of our importance from our social value. But when that social value is restricted to a certain percentage, it means you can never leverage understanding things because it is capped to what it is you understand and people we relate to. If you don't have friends who own apartments and investment buildings and things like this, your social value may be restrictive enough for you to just even get the confidence to do that. Its enhancement comes from the fact that living as a diaspora member, you have a max capacity of what you can understand based on the people you choose to relate to and relate with. But you don't have to have friends who are Australian or friends who are from England for you to know things. But the level of comfort that you need to be able to do certain things requires some sort of understanding, some sort of encouragement. And you gain that easier from an enhancement of your social value. You learn more, you can be able to apply for jobs, you get opportunities. That's the best leverage you can get as someone who's not from a place. People call it acclimatization, but that's just the genesis of feeling comfortable. Once you've acclimatized, you may acclimatize to the weather, your house, your suburb, but never gone to Fremantle, never gone to Margaret River to see, okay, there's this and that there. And what is it that I'm interested in that can enhance my understanding of this? Or should I buy an apartment here or there? That's the best leverage you have. The other thing is the reciprocal factor to back home. Now, as countries become more connected, sometimes you may not be a great entrepreneur here, or you may not be able to build wealth here, but lo and behold, you're very confident to buy an apartment somewhere where you come from because management will be easier. You will have the comfort maybe because you don't have your own permanent residency here yet, and you don't want to waste the time because opportunities now. So in Kenya, for instance, we've had banks, so KCB, Kingdom Bank, and all these banks who have done this very well. They've come and done roadshows here to be able to help diaspora members leverage the opportunities and leverage everything they have in a comfortable space that they can relate to at this stage of their lives.
Do you, I didn't, at least coming from a place of experience, right? One of the things I was going to ask you, you've spoken a lot about invest in Africa.
Right.
As we see Kenyan, so you talked about Kenyan diasporans going back home to invest and stuff like that, true? Is that a realistic target? Is that realistic? Coming from a place of experience, so I'll give you an example. So last year not just last year, from 2022 up until last year, we had this stuff for building in Africa. Nigeria was a learning platform. And one of the key problems we encountered, of course, skill, ease of doing business, as well as generally fitting into the system.
Right.
All right. And getting people to understand. So you come from a place where things work. You understand how things should work. And you're talking to someone like, this should be this way, this should go this way, and then you're having this, but this is how we do it, and then you head this can't work. Anyway, in my view, anyway, consider that a bit too much.
Right.
Building or starting or investing in Africa. What's your take on this?
I'll start by saying congratulations that you even thought of that. It's not many people who even have the confidence to think of it, There's one important thing, and I'll use Kenya as a case study again. So in Kenya, we have the area called Kilimani. I say in Kenya, there's literally like trees growing everywhere, but these trees are buildings. So there's apartment, looking for apartment, because most of the demand comes from diaspora members who are overseas. Yeah. Banking in Kenya and finance in Kenya became very worldwide. There were products like M-Pesa, which could reach. You could be in Canada operating M-Pesa and paying your workers from your bed in Vancouver. You could be in Cincinnati or in Sydney, and you could be just managing your books like that. So Kenyans are very adaptive to these things because there's a lot of opportunity in countries like that. Investing in Africa, and particularly diaspora investments, so these are personal investments, okay? They require, first, a lot of feasibility studies. If it's not feasible, and if you don't understand what can challenge it or what can go wrong, you'll struggle. It's not that you won't succeed, you'll struggle. It also requires a lot of regulatory compliance and oversight. The biggest cases we had in Kenya were family members who'd misappropriated their family member who's in the diaspora's investments. This led to very serious cases of murder, blah, 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 blah. But it led the government to understand that we cannot encourage people to grow our economy because the diaspora is part of a country's economy. Because particularly when you're not domiciled yet, like me, or someone who hasn't received their permanent residence yet, they are considered part of the Kenyan economy because they count to the sensory factors when they do their census. Like I said, when we keep sending money back home, and suddenly banks are dealing with billions of Kenyan shillings, only because of a diaspora, the government became very aware that they had to do this. So in turn, in Kenya, they started something called the State Department for Diaspora Affairs. And one of its mandates was just that it had to create frameworks to allow diaspora members to invest easily. The best thing I can say that in a case study that the problem we have in Kenya is that we, in Africa and most other diaspora countries, even the Americas, is that there's a disconnect between regulatory compliance and oversight from governments, financial institutions, other institutions, to people's desires. So if you solve things back home without following a regular system, and now you're in the diaspora, you can afford the regular system, but it's still frustrating. You have to trust your aunt or you have to trust your brother to manage it. If something goes wrong, it means the risk you're taking increases more and more when there is no certainty as to how the system and processes will be followed. If the investment is a normal investment, the issue of management as well is another thing. Many businesses that are started like this, they require a lot of management in a certain phase of the business. Many people don't have those connections back home to be able to grow or sustain that development that they need at that stage, because you still have to make that money that you're investing. You still have to live here. Sometimes you have a family. So it still relies on social structures. But I say the case study with Kenya, I've seen a great improvement. If an entire government created a ministry to do this, I would encourage any minister, any person who advocates for diaspora members in wherever they are, to take such ideas and go forward. In Rwanda, the same. Rwanda has even gotten to the point where jobs are open for their diaspora members to come and compete.
Okay.
So you find that mutuality in people knowing that as a nurse here with my skill, I've reached a plateau. Whereas in Rwanda, in Kigali, I can become the head of a practice making almost the same amount of money. But the value of your money there may be more higher than it is here. That's what encourages investments. But the feasibility study, excuse me, and the opportunity and everything that will guarantee the protection for you as a business person must be at an optimum level that you can manage it adequately, even when you're far away, effectively when you're far away. Like that, and you can also solve any issues that may accrue thereafter, even if you're disconnected from that country at the time physically.
Let's talk about Scodian. I read a bit about it. Of course, it's talent. What's it called? Help me with it. Let's talk about Scodian.
Scodian. So Scodian is our latest subsidiary. It will be the core focus of my work, part-time work, because I'm currently planning to go back to full-time legal practice, just to be able to get through the restriction periods that are imposed on the regulation standards. Now, as a migrant, I saw a big opportunity here. We have very core industries that really struggle with labor. And labor is basically the backbone of Australian politics, if you do follow politics. You see, I love politics. I hate politicians. I used to hate politics. Even as of last year in September or November, I hated politics. But I came to an epiphany lately through my friends, mostly my friend Ian, that I do understand it very well to be able to harness it. And I'm starting to love the entertainment factor of it, but mostly the decisiveness it's giving me, the things I want to do professionally. That's why I love politics. The labor is a backbone of Australian politics, and it's hidden in, people call it migration. Yeah. But if you look at what factor of migration do people hate, in the 80s, there were many people from South Africa, Zambia, Zimbabwe who came here. But it wasn't a problem then because there was a self-sustaining ecosystem where there was labor and equal amount of migrants who could do it. And the system here is quite tough, migration. Yeah? So Scodian was a very, very good invention that created a path for workers to be able to migrate from Kenya and come and work here without facing all the hurdles that they faced and without also coming to restudy here. It took a lot of work. And particularly government-to-government work. You see, I'm proud to say that as of last week on Monday, we officially got the current memorandum of understanding with the Kenyan government, the State Department of Diaspora Affairs, which is quite big because we're the first Kenyan diaspora business that has achieved this with the new ministry. And I'm very proud because it took a lot of investment to get there, to design these things. It's a framework that included legal financial framework that's quite unique because we had to negotiate with banks to create funding channels and also government to create funding channels, and then here labor hire companies have a standard structure of paying people and ensure that whatever it's being lent to the worker is repaid back to the financial institution because just to the amount of wages that they have. So I'm very proud of Scodian, and it's something that I drew my own personal experience in migration from to be able to design. My co-director, Newton Ndege, and they were very helpful in the finance side of it, and all our advisors from SRLV in the UK to Okwacha & Co Associates in Kenya, and to here Esther and Saul who've helped us with all our migration issues. and also internally with our effort and dedication to building this subsidiary. I do think it will be the genesis of many other African countries doing this, and it's an IP that I would want to reciprocate in other jurisdictions as well, bias to African countries, of course, because we do possess a really high human capital resource. You see, India and China used to be the leading in the world, but obviously due to regulations, suddenly Africa is favorable, because, for instance, in India, people were tired of trying to compete to go overseas. So what professional services partners started doing is bringing the work internally. So you find KPMG outsource to a firm in New Delhi. Suddenly their human capital resource is not as valuable because their local market is competing with the national market. The only difference, they're not leaving the country. So that really reduced the level of the human capital resource. Whereas in Africa, I think the graph is just going higher and higher and higher. Even scandalously, if you look at in Russia, Kenyan workers going to join the Russian military, Ghanaian workers, Nigerian workers. If Kenyan policemen who went to become to the saving grace in Haiti as well. You see, so all of these things can only lead to one thing: to understand that the human capital resource in Africa is the highest it's ever been. And if you understand opportunity and chance favors a prepared mind. You have to harness opportunities from that. And that intersection, like you started saying, between law and finance and government, particularly diplomacy, is the most important thing to be able to harness some of these opportunities. It's not easy. This is not the type of businesses that every Tom, Dick, and Harriet can start. So I just tell people to learn the principles to understand how a government is shaping up, how is climate change affecting, how I can send fish from Mozambique to China, whatever, because the core elements are the same. We couldn't do this without the Australian government. We couldn't do it without the Kenyan government. We couldn't do it without any other secretary persons who helped us within the Kenyan High Commission Office, etc., and the platform they gave us to be able to discuss our ideas and to test it. So you have to test theories and methods and models to be able to commercialize them fully. Was brilliant and fantastic.
Now, for someone in layman's term watching this that wants to understand Scodian and how that can be of help to them, say they were somewhere in Kenya, and you're listening to you watching this, in simple time, how would Scodian help this person, an engineer or whatever, a doctor, whatever, that wants to move from Nairobi to Australia to work?
To provide them with a platform where they can be visible and they can also get all...
It's like a marketplace.
It's yes.
Okay.
But also the visibility to the employers, because for us, the employers here would be our clients.
Okay.
Understand that. But there's one more thing. There's a skill that's needed to be able to get that visa, the right visa. That's a legal skill that's needed. That's catered for. But the equal opportunity without the financial burden. Everyone wants to go overseas. What do you have to do?
So how do they get
That's funded. The model funds it. The framework funds it itself, and so it's repaid here in the structures for 48 months, sort of.
So I'll just create a scenario. I am an engineer. I want to migrate out of Kenya to come to Australia. I come to Scodian. Online, I input my details.
We have a project partner in Kenya.
Okay.
Jobs and Works.
Okay, so I go to them. They capture my details, upload it where?
We get something called job orders.
Okay.
So I'll use say a mining company. Say,
do you know Andela?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just not very similarity, but go ahead.
It's not a digital platform, let's say. It's a framework between two governments and an entity in between that will be solving some labor issues for select client companies to be able to come. Yes, to be able to source labor from Kenya.
Typically, one of the questions I had when I was putting this together was, why would an Australian company want to hire from Kenya?
Because of our high value here. You see, so we encompass about 40% of the healthcare market in disability.
What happens to the Australian and quote Australian experience? What happens to the Australian experience most of local companies would generally ask for?
It's a facade, yeah. An Australian experience, like I said, it's politics. You see, if someone says an Australian experience, how can they gauge someone cannot adapt that experience within a certain time frame?
But-
And for commerce, remember, they have to satisfy the three core things about the commercial output before they start creating what I call an outlook. You see, without you having a real estate, without you having a brand, you cannot have a positive outlook because you have nothing to be able to create that outlook. Kenyans and mostly, particularly international students here, they became a solution to many companies, and that table has to flip because international students have restrictions, they have challenges, etc. Now imagine that same human capital resource without all those restrictions. Yeah. Just imagine that the same worker, already trained, already experienced, without hurdles that international students face.
What's your take then on because there are standards, right? So we've got the stress standards. If you're an engineer like myself, talk about the NC code and all those many code. Oftentimes, when you go to when you school here, these are some of the things they want you to familiarize yourself.
That's why I say it was a government-to-government framework.
Okay.
So two governments have to come and agree as to whether your standards are allowed in Australia and what can be done to amend it. So will this worker needs to retrain in a certain field? Do they have to come on a training visa as opposed to coming on a full work visa first? You see, all of these can only be agreed by government, not on a private company. Like Seek.com cannot give you a chance. They'll only show you the job, but they will never be able to give you anything else. But they lacked a framework to be able to support a successful migration of a worker. But have you ever asked yourself why, if a new project is starting in Mosman Park, the building goes very quickly when a private equity firm that's funded by the W government or something starts up? Only because there's a framework already that exists between certain countries, India and Australia, China to some extent, where they can get 1,000 construction workers who just come, they work and they go. See, so such frameworks, I used to think that they were biased, but they weren't. Our diplomatic efforts were just lacking to be able to create such frameworks. Because if our diplomatic efforts are only to do with who's bereaved and who's gone to prison and who's done this, it means to enhance that relationship, you've missed out on a lot to be able to help advance such agendas. Kenya's current economic agenda is to allow young people to be able to get opportunities overseas.
So how do you, sorry to cut you then, how do we then ensure some of these young employees do not get taken advantage of? Because oftentimes when you come into a system, like many things are unknown to you.
Oh, yes.
And you can easily be taken advantage of.
So the framework has training, and so they're called pre-departure trainings, okay? If government designed this, it means that they also have the onus, and we'll have the onus to be able to ensure that these people are not only job ready, skill-wise, but they're also ready for a culture shock. They're also ready to understand that these countries have laws. So the biggest risk we have is that someone doesn't fit in, or they cannot conform to certain standards that are just normal or average standards. And all of these things have, the framework guides all of this. I think once all of this becomes public, you may be able to critique it better, and you can see that it protects that worker protection. Just how the Fair Work Act says, it protects it, and it ensures that this would be something that can be achieved. There's some industries that have critical shortages. Teachers in New South Wales, shearers in New South Wales.
Plumbers in NWA. I just had done a project on getting a plumber. Was really hard to get a plumber.
Yeah. So, but there's no single source solution to this.
Yeah.
It's not that if we bring workers here, it fixes a problem. Your framework has to sustain itself, and you have to keep improving it until the day it provides a practical solution. Hence why development and testing models is much better than just building industry for business.
Just got a few more and then I was just wrap it off. How are you feeling though?
I'm well, yes.
Beautiful. Now, where do you see African talent in the next 10 to 20 years? For instance, if you go to Nigeria today, so back in the day, remote work was nothing. You don't even hear people say, oh, I live in Lagos, I work for a company in the US, or I live in Lagos, I work for a company in Canada or wherever. But today, I was in Lagos 2 years ago, And pretty much everybody, almost everybody, had this remote company they're working for in the US and stuff. So it's become like the talent hub for many of these countries.
Uh-huh.
Where do you see Africa in the next 10, 20 years?
The same industry, digital markets, and anything that has been digitalized to allow the ease and convenience of working.
Yeah.
I think Africa will be dominant in that. We forget that these markets did exist in the US in the 90s. We had people who were salespeople, but they never leave their couch. You just have to train a company's voice and take 100,000 phone calls a day. The more calls you take, the more commission you got. See, so it's just normalized now because we've now deviated from something I started by saying standardization. We come from a standardized culture. See, we all go to church dressed up, all do things the same way. So that deviance. Now, the beauty of deviance is that the Gen Zs, or the younger generation in Africa, they have a lot of free will and freedom of choice. And sometimes you have freedoms, but you don't have the responsibility. Sometimes you have the free will, but you don't know how to be responsible for that. Now, Gen Zs are the only the first ones who have rebranded that freedom. See, for instance, I'm Kenyan. I love music. In my first 6 years of living here, there was one or two Kenyan artists that came, DJs. The last 2 years, we've had really good DJs, Mr. C, Sir M. These are kids. I'm talking early 20s, okay? Doing international tours, organized themselves and being able to market themselves and do this. Do you know how impressive that is? In Kenya, in Victoria, there's a Kenyan girl called Vanessa Atika. She's an architect, I think, by training, but she also does fashion, but not the standard form of fashion where you just like clothes. She's really commercialized her skills. She has an agency that seeks opportunities for her. She must have a timetable because she has a day job, but she also does all of this. And she's appeared in really great magazines. That's the future of Africa. Africa's been able to be dominant in industries that have creativity. Because when there's a saturation of a market, the only thing that you can separate is how creative you are within that market. You see, so I think the current saturation we have in Africa of unemployment, and particularly because underemployment is equally as worse as unemployment, will create such creative schemes to get us, which are legal, because in the past we relied on illegalities to be able to be creative. But legal schemes how people can still make a dime, but be professionally branded internationally or globally. That to me is the biggest future that Africa would have. That you'd have people who want to be solicitors to be able to learn trademark and copyright, to be able to help artists, as opposed to the traditional view of a lawyer should do this.
Yeah.
We'd have pilots who don't want to only fly for Kenya Airways or for Ethiopian Airlines, but can see, okay, a pilot can also join the Red Cross. A pilot can be in the emergency here. And that expansion of their freedom of choice, because it's not prejudiced anymore. If I have my child, I don't want my child to feel that they have to become like me.
Yeah.
Of course, it would be my dream if one day I appear before a judge and the opposing counsel is my son or my co-counsel is my son. That would be heavenly. But I will not impose such standards on them to be able to enhance their free will. All I can do is show them that regardless of what you do, certain values must be there. And from that, that's how you go in life. That will enhance someone's creativity more than the other. The last bit is confidence in identity. I think we've also suffered so much in our lives as Africans because you're always fighting a perception of who we are, who you are. The less that becomes, it enhances our own identity. Let me use an easy example. Afrobeats. One of the best things I love nowadays is getting into an Uber, which is being driven by a Pakistani. And I'm from Kenya, and I just hear Davido, and this guy knows the song. Selena Gomez made a song with someone, Rema. The song, some 1 billion views. You go to a bar. I went to a cafe, and they were playing Afrobeat. And the joy that gives me. Because suddenly, the identity of what I love doesn't have to be constrained to people who can't share that. Because I listened to Chris Brown before I listened
Yes.
to David. I listened to Lil Wayne. I know his songs word by word, and I couldn't sing a song that came from my parents' language and tribe. So it's that confidence in our identity is one key element that once we lock it in properly, we go forward, because it also allows people who are not African to be able to be comfortable in their adventure within Africa, in their understanding the exploration within our culture.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, I was in Nairobi. I was working there, and I had a day off during Easter. I went to a music concert called Gondwana. There was an artist from South Africa. It's called Jazzworks. He did a nice show. There were so many Westerners. There were so many white people. There were so many Indians. And it is so joyous where we can share a product that has no common factor to what they have, but just
For the love of music.
for the love of music. That no one is prejudiced in the other. It was just music.
I do see music as one of our biggest, currently for Nigeria, it is one of our biggest, if not the biggest exporter of culture. Where you see people troop down to Lagos, this is every December to experience music, Afrobeat, and a lot of other stuff. And similar to your experience as well, walked into 7-Eleven a couple years, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and I heard right from the speakers, I could hear the video, I could hear Burna Boy. Like, I stood for a while, I heard the song. It was a new song at the time. Was this new song? I can't remember who sang the song. I hadn't heard it before, but of course, you knew Afrobeat when you heard Afro. So I stood, I brought my phone, opened Shazam, and I put it up. Let me hear who is that. And it was one of those artists. I was filled with so much joy that finally you could relate. They could relate to what it is identity. You could meet at a common point, something that's not bringing us together, and also you don't need to explain yourself too much. All I need to say, I'm Nigerian, for instance, and the next guy, oh, that's where Burna Boy is from, or that's where this guy is from.
Yes.
Just like back in the day, you listen to Two-Face, listen to 50 Cent and the rest of them, and you could easily tell, oh, he's an American. Oh, the dressing and everything gets you like.
And those are the biggest ambassadors for the country. I have to give a mention to certain businesses I've seen within Perth that are just great for this. There's a dance school called Afro Unity.
Okay.
Afro Unity, they've just been great cultural diplomats. The cultural diplomacy is an arm of diplomacy.
Yep.
Cultural diplomacy is the easiest way, easiest advancement. Like you call it an export, is the easiest advancement to join and merge cultures. Businesses like Afro Unity, you see, I watch their videos and I see people from all walks of life. It's very rare to see a Japanese, just going down to a song, and it's peace. It's so nice to watch.
So chill.
And for me, who I have to work so hard, waffling here and there just to promote a point. I sometimes wish I could go to these meetings where the governor of Western Australia sat there and be like, mate, let's just watch this. just watch Burna Boy in Melbourne and understand that half of the first 5 rows were just teenagers and Australians who just wanted to see that guy perform. Sometimes I want to take these people to Afro Unity for a dance class on a Thursday for them to understand that it takes people being confident in their identity and in their passions to be able to bridge that diplomatic gap of cultures.
And I think, honestly, for many young people as well, for many Africans here, for those that haven't really been home before, hearing those songs, listening to the rise to these songs and how those songs has influenced culture, this is influencing culture, it also helped, like you said earlier, sense of identity is improved it so much so that you could, I don't feel any way if you call me a black man. Yes, I am an African. Like, I'm proud to be in Nigeria without being or feeling negative about it, you understand? I was saying, I had a conversation, I think it was 2 weeks ago, Lydia I had on the podcast, I talked about racism. My view, my current view on racism. I target as ignorance now, the fear of what they don't know. So anyone that displays a racist attitude or act towards me, I don't get moved. I don't get, as like, it's just ignorant. You don't know something about me.
Yeah.
And so the first thing you do is to put me on the side. But once you know a certain bit about me, it just takes away that barrier.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
You know.
And I also have a challenge to my fellow peers, particularly people from different places. We've been being two Africans, we talk about Africa a lot. Some countries have natural cultural drivers, you see. See Brazil and sports and football, these things like that, you know. Mexico and their music, and their parties, which you see. We have to be the first point of bridging this gap. So I made it a point that every time I go to Kenya, or I see like the Matildas were in Nairobi, the Australian women last week, you know, and just being able to share this with my friends. And I wrote to Matildas were gallivanting in Kenya, you know. I think everyone is an ambassador, everyone is a high commissioner in some sort of way within the diaspora. Because if I help you and I give you social help like that, that ambassadorial function where no one pays you like that, you change a lot in this world of a diaspora-centric living where we really can enhance the relations we have with one another.
True.
And it has never been a much more important time to do this in the world with everything that's happening.
Yeah.
People understanding that indifferences are not, they're not why we're human first. It's a great challenge I have to my friends and people like Vanessa Atika in Melbourne, Afro Unity, you know. I've seen great Munashe Rusamo, she just became partner at Restoring Soul. These are people who took whatever their skills were and they significantly enhanced it to the point they've become ambassadors of Africa as a whole. And we have so many out there, you know, we have so many, but people only know us through sports, through this. Some talents are strange, photography, speaking, comedy, you know, music, professional services, you know, food. There's now an African restaurant in don't know where it is.
Quite a few of them now in town.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, how good would it be if I ever go on a date with someone from Chile to an African restaurant? You know?
Eat fufu.
Yeah, how great can that be? See, that's my dream. I ultimately want to use my career and my profession to become the best flag bearer for our continent, because I think that merger between the relations of many African countries and Australia, and in particular Australia and Asia Pacific, would be the best enhancement we can have for this great nation that has provided us the same opportunity to be who we are. I feel like it's a debt. If I had a mortgage, I think I have a bigger mortgage towards this society.
It's true, yeah.
And I have a dream to take all my friends to Kenya. My father and my family are willing to just be great hosts and just make them see that we do come from somewhere. And that place, for me, it's heavenly. I think I say it's the most beautiful place I've seen.
Let me know whenever you want to go. I'd like to join.
It's restricted to Nigeria. So I'm joking.
Well, yeah, thanks so much, Newton, for joining me on this call.
You're very welcome.
I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Yes, I did, yeah.
Thank you.
And now I don't want to stop.